guys, what's going on? It's Roth and Eric here with another episode of Dragons on the Wall. We're going to talk about the Dance of the Dragons, which is a little confusing title because it's from the book but slightly different. But anyway, we're going to talk about episode 9 of Game of Thrones season 5. Full spoilers. Are you ready? Let's go. Damn! I was gone for 2 weeks, came back, marathon the 3 episodes last night, and what?
And you were like, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
It was just a very boring,
Nothing
uneventful.
happened at all.
Yeah. It was interesting because episode 9 now has this onus on it, right? Like, this is the one. And in fact, last year was the first time there was debate about that because it was all the battle at the wall. And there were some people that felt like it was just okay, you know, and that they had raised their game so much with episode 9 each season. And then this one also had a lot to live up to because it was coming off a huge, eventful episode that most everyone loved.
Yes.
So there was kind of a, and I did wonder in the first few scenes.
Can they top it?
Can they top it? Or are they going to try? I thought, you know, what if episode 9 is just an episode of Game of Thrones? Like maybe they very purposely didn't have anything big happen.
Yeah.
And then some big stuff happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny because I actually had a similar question because I was watching it all in a row. And so I finished watching that huge battle and I was like, I don't know what you're doing in this next episode, but it better be amazing. I had an idea of what they might do, which was the last scene in the fighting pits, which is going to be a crowd pleaser because it's well done, dragon. But that's maybe not the biggest moment of the night.
It's not. I mean, you know, look, as far as moments that are impactful go, it's hard to beat, if that's the right word.
Child murder?
Murdering a poor, innocent, sweet little girl at the stake. Yeah, I mean, that was rough. On a show that has already been like so merciless, taking out so many characters we love in horrible ways, this was a next level event because it was a sweet little girl who they'd actually worked hard to make sure was a full-fledged character on the show with many scenes and important relationships, especially with Davos. And it was her own dad sending her to her death.
And I think the key too is that not only had we become connected to Shireen, which they pointedly made sure we were, but we were connected to Stannis as well, and in a more significant way in the show, I think, than in the books. You know, I was watching that scene with like a big dude who's like works in horror movies, and he was destroyed. Because it was that scream and her pleas for her parents, and I think it was also her mother's last, right there at the 11th. Well, it was the 13th hour. It was just too late. She tapped back into her motherhood. She'd always been so cruel to her. And then she suddenly realized this is way too far, no matter what we're after here. It was an incredible scene. I will say this, that I saw it coming in this sense. You know, once Melisandre was on about the royal blood, and we knew that, and she was the only one left available, and the show was pointedly making us attached to her in a very significant way through Davos, through Stannis. I was like, man, it's not going to turn out well for this little girl.
Yeah, I don't agree with some who say that it either came out of nowhere or that like Stannis would never do that. I think, look, this is a super stern guy that the show had to work hard this past year to make us start to feel warmer towards, which to their credit they did do. You know, we started to see more like, oh, I see where this guy is coming from, and he is the better choice and all this stuff. But we were introduced to him as this very harsh guy who would pointedly put this woman next to him that was, you know, whispering in his ear, and he already had killed his brother with a demon baby, guys, you know?
Yeah, with the smoke monster mirror baby. Also, he was burning people alive. Lest we forget, he and Melisandre have been very fond of this. You know? It's not like this is the first time.
This wasn't like, hey, this is a great idea. But I mean, again, I think it makes it worse that it wasn't easy choice for him. He's not, you know, it wasn't portrayed as like this guy feels nothing for this, and he did love her.
Absolutely.
And yet we talked before about how this season's kind of been about fanaticism and like kind of the religious sects are getting a lot more, that sect, not sex, getting a lot more focus here and kind of understanding what these different beliefs are. So yeah, here's a guy who does love his daughter, and yet he even more so is driven by this belief, I'm supposed to be in charge, there's a religious component to being in charge, and so I have to do this.
Well, in monarchical systems, there was always a religious component. You know, like they were ordained by God. Sometimes they were gods on earth. You know, like pharaohs and stuff, or they were ordained by God, right? So there was always kind of a religious component to most monarchs. But in this particular situation, I really actually think that Stannis is more driven by his need to be right. He really believes that that is his right. And once he's decided something like that, there is no turning back for him. Melisandre, I think, is more driven by the belief that, hey, listen, if Stannis doesn't win and become the king, the whole world's going to die. Now, I know we don't have compassion for Melisandre. We don't.
Yeah.
But she believes that. And I think as a book reader, you feel that a little more. She really thinks that that's true, that it's either this little girl or everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's kind of where she's coming from. But I think they very pointedly had that scene with Stannis and his daughter a couple of episodes where you really saw that there was a gentler side to him, one that could be loving and loyal. And that was shattered the way Valyrian steel shatters whites this week. And so were our hearts. I mean, do you think this was the most heartbreaking scene they've ever done?
Might be, yeah, it might be. And it's funny. It's interesting. Something that's happened a lot this season because this has been, even by Game of Thrones terms, has been a very harsh season. And there's been a lot of debate about Game of Thrones this season and all these questions about, oh man, they're going so far. And it's not, there's always going to be people being like, what show do you think you signed on for? And want to be like, I'm hardcore. What do you think you're signing up for? Like, look, but at the end of the day, if you're feeling depressed by something, that can be, I can understand, like, I'm all in on Game of Thrones. I thought that was an excellent episode this week, but there are some people who are like, I can't keep watching a show that is this depressing.
Yeah, it's really...
like, because it's like, is this entertaining to you? That's a decision that a lot of people have to make for themselves.
I agree. And that's really funny because we will have social questions, but a couple of them are about that question, like Christy Boston is like, I'd like you guys to talk about my feels and why GOT likes to hurt them.
Right.
And we agree. I mean, we're focusing here on this big event in terms of the sacrifice. We're going to talk about the show in a bigger way, of course, including dragons. Dragons! I loved it. I know some people are complaining about the VFX. It's a TV show, and he looked great. Anyway, we're going to talk about all that and more in our larger episode of our show. Tune back in for that. For now, let us know what you thought of the episode overall. Does it live up to the Ep9 hype? Did you like last week's better? And is this the most heartbreaking thing you've ever seen on Game of Thrones, or can that even be quantified?
And did you think Stannis had been motivated and like that had been set up that he would do this?
Do you think that this was an appropriate move for this character? Leave your comments below, and we'll see you in a little bit.